Holy fucking shit, I'm DigiBro, and welcome to my new show, Random Drunk Ass Anime History. The show where I get appropriately drunk and talk about random anime history stuff. For a long time, I've been wanting to do some kind of series on anime history because I have a stupidly encyclopedic knowledge of anime history that I want to share with the world, but it's hard to come up with like concise things to say. Like, it's one thing to do something like my Cowboy Bebop Diaspora video where I can go like, oh, here's all these people who worked on all these shows, but I want to give you more just broad historical concept stuff apropos of nothing just for the sake of doing it. I have so far had this can of Strongbow, this bottle of Stella, this Yingling, and this other Yingling I'm drinking right now. I chugged them all. I know that this seems like incredible lightweight. I get it. It doesn't take much to make me very drunk. I'm drinking this one now to make sure I stay that way. There's a lot of, if it looks like I'm closing my eyes a lot, it's not just the alcohol. There's a lot of lights on me as well. It's fucking right in my face. I've got a shitload of lights. Anyway, today I'm going to tell you the history of robot shows. Giant fucking robot shows. Namely, Mobile Suit Gundam, which is one of the most important anime series of all time, and I don't think a lot of people know why. I think a lot of young people especially might look at Gundam and say, why does everyone care about this so much? So I'm going to attempt to explain why it was important, and why it may still be important. Holy fuck. So to start with this, we have to start where all anime stories ultimately start, with Osamu Tezuka. For those who don't know, Osamu Tezuka is the father of manga and also the father of anime. He was a manga author who did a shitload of stuff. You've probably heard of Astro Boy or Gigantor or any of those old 50s and 60s stuff that he did. Osamu Tezuka was someone who started making manga after World War II. And sort of the popularity of the manga, the popularity of pop culture growing in Japan is attributed to like trying to get over the war and stuff like that, I think. Might be making shit up. Anyway, Osamu Tezuka started drawing a lot of manga and he got really popular. And he was very influenced by Walt Disney, who of course has been around since like not the 1500s, which I almost said, but like the 1915s. Anyway, he was inspired by Disney and he was drawing things like Astro Boy and stuff like that got really popular. And he also kind of fathered anime because Tezuka figured out how to make like cost-cutting techniques to make anime work, because Japanese animation didn't have big budgets the way like Walt Disney films did, where they were these big extravagant pieces of animation. Tezuka was trying to figure out how to convert these little four-panel comics that he was drawing into animation. And that's where they found out that if you just make shows like 4 frames per second and like really just translate manga panel to anime scene. The theory basically was that it wasn't so much about animation as in the movement of things happening. It was more about like the individual frames. Like that's basically the theory of anime. How anime is made is that they're more concerned about each frame being beautiful than they are about the motion being beautiful. Which is why directors that actually do concern themselves with motion and animation get more acclaim in the West or in artistic circles, like Masaaki Yuasa, who obviously his style is more about the movement and less about the individual frames. Anyway, that's a whole other fucking discussion, but the point is, Osamu Tezuka was the father of fucking manga and anime, and he started it. Well, also around that time in the 50s, Astro Boy was probably the first robot in manga and anime, but he's a small robot. First big robot is Tetsujin 28, who you've probably heard of as Gigantor. I think I said Gigantor earlier in regards to Osamu Tezuka. That was a mistake. He did not draw Gigantor. Anyways, Gigantor, also known as Tetsujin 28, came out in the 1950s, and it was the first giant robot. But the way that Gigantor is controlled is that there's a kid who, like, I think he has a watch that he talks into. He's something. He commands Gigantor from a distance. He was just a guy who stood there and commanded Gigantor. And in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the anime that came out in particular was very child-oriented. Like, there were manga that were aimed more towards adults. Even Osamu Tezuka had some pretty adult stories, but a lot of the anime stuff was more kid-oriented. There weren't a lot of adult anime. And with giant robots, that was especially true. So you had stuff like Gigantor, and then a lot of imitators sprung up, obviously. And even the manga author himself, who did Gigantor, also did Giant Robo, which didn't get adapted to anime until much later, I think. I don't know if there was an original Giant Robo anime. But anyway, there was a bunch of shows that were about, like, kids who commanded giant robots. Well, in the, I don't know if it was the late 60s or the early 70s, but a manga author named Go Nagai, who is very famous, all of his series have been hugely influential, created the manga series Mazinger. Mazinger Z in particular. And Mazinger was the first robot series that had the kid pilot the robot. So all these shows had been kid giving commands to giant robot, and Shin Mazinger said, well, what if we put the kid inside the fucking robot and had him pilot the fucking thing, and that was Mazinger Z. So that's like revolutionary. Now the kid's piloting the fucking robot. I don't even think he was a kid. He was in high school. Whatever. Fucking dude pilots a robot. But it was still a kid-oriented show. And all the shows in the 70s, all the robot shows were all very kid-centric. Some of them were a little bit more like kids love it, but it's also a little bit more adult. There's one, I don't remember what it's called, that was like sort of a James Bond character as the main character who piloted the robot. Someone who's an old asshole can comment below and remind me which one that is. But anyway, the point is, most of these shows were very silly and dumb, and they were mostly made to sell toys because kids love robot toys and they'd buy a shitload of them. Well, then there was one man who thought, what if we took giant robots, which are fucking awesome no matter what, and we made a giant robot show that was actually, like, militaristic. Like, what if we tried to make a real context where people would use giant robots to fight, like, real wars? Because wouldn't that be cool? And that man was Yoshiyuki Tomino, the guy who created Mobile Suit Gundam. So, when the fuck did Gundam come out? 1969 or 70? It was like right after Star Wars. There's a lot of obvious Star Wars influence on Gundam and on everything that came out at all in that time frame, because Gundam has the lightsabers and everything. Maybe it was 79. Yeah, it would have been like much later than Star Wars came out in 69. So Gundam was 1979 was when Mobile Suit Gundam, the original series, came out. And the TV series, basically, Tomino wanted it to be the most realistic thing possible. And he thought if it's a military machine, it should be all white. It should just be a white machine. They wouldn't paint it all these bizarre colors and stuff. But the companies wouldn't let him do it. They were like, it has to look like a toy. It has to be something we can sell and market. I know you're trying to aim this towards something that adults can appreciate, but they wanted to also market it enough towards kids, enough towards selling toys. Jesus Christ, I fucking... Here he goes. So anyway, they told Tomino no white Gundam, so he made the blue, red, and yellow Gundam. And then in the original Mobile Suit Gundam TV series, it's very like robot of the week. Like each episode, there's some unique robot that's obviously like, here, you can buy toys of this robot. And it ran for 39 episodes. It was supposed to run for 52, I think, and then they had to shorten it. It didn't get to complete its run. It didn't have great ratings. Mobile Suit Gundam, obviously kids were like, what the fuck? Adults weren't used to watching giant robot anime, so it didn't do that well. But what happened was the series had a lot of reruns, and it also had 3 movies that they made out of it. They took the original 39 episode series and they compiled it into 3 2-hour-long movies. And the movies took out a lot of the Monster of the Week stuff and made it more of a streamlined narrative, so you could really appreciate the more adult story, the more war story that was actually in there, that was very character driven and actually pretty interesting. I do recommend these 3 movies. They are good shit, especially the third one is really great. But anyway, they made it into 3 movies, and the reruns on TV started to make the show grow in popularity. It did start selling toys. It did start making its money back. And so Gundam as a franchise began to grow. So this was the first anime about giant robots that got an adult audience. And also around this time was really when adult-centric anime started to take off, and the concept of the otaku, the person who's obsessed with anime, really started to be born. Because throughout the 70s, then most of the anime that came out were either aimed towards kids, or they were more like family entertainment. I won't say family, maybe just stuff that anyone would like. It was more stuff like Rose of Versailles or Ashita no Joe. These shows were like in the common people, everyone knew about them. every person knew about these shows. They weren't just aimed towards anime fans. They were aimed towards the general population of Japan. People knew about those shows. But Mobile Suit Gundam started to spark this sort of obsessive fandom who was really into the robots, who wanted to own the model kits, who cared about the character designs and the animation style. And that's where we started to spawn stuff like Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, which is known in the West as Robotech. Macross was like the first show that took like the influence of Gundam and then also added in like all this other stuff that had romance plot. It had I think Shoji Kawamori, who created Macross, said that it was really a romance story on the backdrop of great battles. That was the concept behind the show. He wanted it to be something that had awesome fights in it. It had characters dying. It had a war story. But all of that was really the backdrop to the core narrative of a love story. And I think Macross could really be credited as the first, like, otaku anime. It was the first thing that was made by big-time anime fans wanting to make something that was distinctly anime. And, you know, and after the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise, like, after it started to take off and gain steam in the mid-80s, then Tomino went on to create Zeta Gundam, which is a way darker, more adult series. It's a direct sequel to Mobile Suit Gundam, taking place, like, I think 10 years later or something like that. But it is, like, characters constantly die. It's way more dark, way more realistic, even though the thing about Tomino is that his directing style is fucking weird. So, like, his shows always have, like, stuff that's really good and then stuff that's really, like, oh god. So, you kind of can't have to take some things that you like and some things that you hate out of any of his shows, but nonetheless, Zeta Gundam is a really good show. In any case, throughout the 80s, that's where the anime culture really started to spring. Through stuff like Gundam and Macross, more and more people were getting into shows, caring about animation, caring about who makes the show, caring about the characters. And as anime started to swell and come together, that's when the otaku were born. And the people who really represented the identity of the otaku was the studio Gainax, who you may have heard of. They did Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is one of the most famous anime of all time. And Gainax were famous for being otaku. That was the whole concept of their studio. They were the otaku studio. If I haven't explained what otaku means yet, it means big time anime fan. I think most people know that, but I just felt like pointing it out. Otaku is a gigantic anime fanboy. Anyway, when Gainax came about, it was in the mid 80s, and they started by making these short little animations called the Daikon animations for like a convention called Daikon, and they made these little animations for the introductions, and they would have like all these references and cameos of all this pop culture stuff, both Western and Eastern. You know, like the Macross Fortress was in there with Darth Vader and Optimus Prime and all this crazy shit. It's a lot of fun. And then they would go on to later start making their own anime that were, you know, big and important. But the thing that they made that most exemplifies the otaku culture was a movie, or two OVAs rather, called Otaku no Video, which came out in 1990, I want to say. And Otaku Video was the ultimate expression of that time period, of what it meant to be an otaku. It was about the passion that people felt towards anime. And the series is actually, it was part animation, part live action. It would cut between them. The live action parts would be about otaku, like, and they're all like staged, but they were supposed like a fake documentary about people who were otaku, who were obsessed with Mobile Suit Gundam and Macross, like everyone else, had their figures, had like recorded all these tapes of every anime, were playing the earliest visual novels, like the earliest porny visual novels. It's hard to believe that there were like pornographic visual novels in the 80s, but they totally fucking existed on those old-ass CRT computers. And it covers that in Otaku no Video, as well as telling this awesome story about these two guys who become major otaku and try to make their own anime studios, and in the end end up turning like the entire world into otaku. It's fucking great. Otaku no Video is a must-see for a burgeoning, passionate anime fan. So anyways, that's basically the birth of otaku culture. And that's why Gundam is so important to anime fans, because it pretty much started anime culture. It was the first show that brought anime to an adult audience. But the funny thing about Gundam is that it's still around. You know, a lot of these shows fade into obscurity, but Gundam has been coming out forever. And what happened was, as it was coming out, in the 70s and 80s, it was being directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino, the guy who created it. He got fucking sick of it. He didn't want to keep doing Gundam. And, like, he did, after Zeta Gundam, he did Double Zeta, which is awful. He did Victory Gundam, which is this incredibly fucking violent, weird show where, like, Victory Gundam was basically Tomino didn't want to do Gundam anymore and he was sick of it, so he just made this ridiculous show where people are constantly getting killed and he hated everything and he wanted it to end. So after Victory Gundam, which was a nightmare, Tomino left the Gundam franchise, and that's when Sunrise, the studio who makes Gundam, started experimenting. They started making shows like G Gundam, which was the first of the alternate universe Gundam series. They still had the robots, but it had nothing to do with the original storyline of Gundam. It had none of the seriousness, none of the actual, like, high-tension political storylines. G Gundam was just fun fucking robot show. But the thing is, when they left the series, when Tomino left Gundam, they let him pick which director would come in to do the next Gundam series. And he picked a guy named Yasuhiro Imagawa, who Imagawa is, like, fucking crazy. This is the guy who would later do, he did, throughout the 90s, he was doing an OVA series called Giant Robo, which is based on Giant Robo from the 50s, as I've mentioned before. One of the original robot shows, but Giant Robo, his version, is fucking awesome. Classic show. Awesome show. He was doing Giant Robo. I need to check if this camera still has enough fucking memory left to keep recording. It's a good thing I fucking randomly decided to see if the camera still had enough, like, memory left, because it only had, like, 30 seconds left, and that was good timing on my part. I'm proud of myself. Anyways, so what I was saying, I think Yasuhiro Imagawa, he directed Giant Robo, he went and directed G Gundam. He made it this crazy-ass fucking story that's way over the top, tons of fun, has a lot of stupid episodes, but overall it tells a good story, and G Gundam is just a blast to watch. I do recommend it. He later went on to direct stuff like Shin Mazinger Shogeki Z Hen on television, which is another excellent show that I recommend to everyone. But anyway, enough about Yasuhiro Imagawa. He's a great guy. But he directed G Gundam, and then after that, they made, like, Gundam Wing, which is another alternate universe Gundam. They made Gundam Seed, which is fucking atrocious. 2 seasons of that were 50 episodes apiece. But anyway, the point is, the original Gundam storyline stayed alive throughout the 90s and 2000s through a series of OVAs. They made 8MS Team, 0080, 0083. Later, they would go on to make Gundam Unicorn, which is an awesome OVA series that came out much later, but we'll get to that in a bit. But throughout and also, Tomino actually came back to Gundam in, like, 2000 to direct the show Turn A Gundam, which is another pretty good show that he put together. It's very different from his other Gundam shows. It's more lighthearted and very weird, and has a Yoko Kanno soundtrack, but it's not like other Gundam shows. It's very bizarre. And then that was the last Tomino-directed Gundam show. So throughout the 2000s, it was mostly alternate universe Gundam stuff, like Gundam Seed, or Gundam 00 in the second season of that. A lot of that shit. And then, at some point, 5 years ago, there was the Gundam 30th anniversary. And around this time, Sunrise suddenly decided that they just wanted to, like, market the fuck out of Gundam. Now, mind you, all this time, Gundam has been selling very well. There's been tons of toys, tons of shit for the series. There's all these SD Gundam shows, the Super Deformed Gundam, where they'll have, like, all these little OVAs or miniature shows that are 13 episodes about Super Deformed Gundams. There was one that came to the US that I remember watching and loving as a kid. But there's a ton of SD Gundam shows, so there's always been a lot of, like, cash-in Gundam stuff that's just there to sell more Gundam toys. But after the 30th anniversary, that's when they built the full-size Gundam. It was there in Japan. It was literally a 1-to-1 scale Gundam model that they had up for like a year before they took it down. And around that time, they started making more Gundam series. They started making Gundam Unicorn, which is the OVA series that was back in the Universal Century and was like really high quality. Like the animation is obscenely good. It's beautiful to look at, well told, great story, one of the best Gundam stories that's ever been made. Gundam Unicorn is really good. And they also started making a lot of weird spin-off Gundam, like most recently Gundam Build Fighters, which is a show about it's like a tournament sports anime about a game. It's almost like a Yu-Gi-Oh type show, but instead of using cards, people build Gundam models and then they fight with them in a virtual world. Like you put down your Gundam model and then you fight in like a virtually crafted environment. It's fucking weird, but it's apparently a really great show. People love Gundam Build Fighters. They're making a second season of it coming out this fall. In addition to, for the 35th anniversary of Gundam now, Yoshiyuki Tomino, who has not done a Gundam since 2000 with Turn A Gundam, is coming back to the Gundam franchise to do a series called Gundam Origin, which is a prequel to the original Gundam. So this is something to be excited about as a Gundam fan, but also weirdly cautious about, because Tomino is a fucking weird director. This is the same guy who gave us Garzy's Wing, the worst anime ever made that I fucking love. One of my top 5 favorite shows. In complete honesty, it's a blast to watch. Only watch it dubbed. It's all on YouTube. Watch it. Watch Garzy's Wing. You will not regret it. It's fucking amazing in the worst way. But anyway, Yoshiyuki Tomino, weird director, has done some great stuff, has done some horrible stuff, but he's coming back to Gundam for Gundam Origin. It's a thing to be bewildered about. And also, there's a Gundam Fighter Season 2. I haven't finished Gundam Build Fighter Season 1. I just watched the first episode, but I'm excited about the prospect of 2 Gundam shows airing at once. It should be interesting. And hopefully I've given you some sense of why Gundam is important. It's not necessarily that every Gundam show is good. In fact, people vastly disagree about what their favorite Gundam shows are. Some people really like Gundam Wing, either because of nostalgia or because they think it's a really good show. Some people really like Double O or Seed. Some people only like Universal Century Gundam. Some people only like the OVAs, because all the OVAs are like really tight and actually well written, whereas like Zeta Gundam is like, some episodes are fucking brilliant and some of them are what am I watching. So the Gundam franchise is really weird, and you have to really dig deep into it to find what you will like and what actually works in the Gundam franchise. But overall, it's fascinating to look at for sure, and it is very important to the culture of anime fandom. You could almost say that Gundam introduced otaku to the world. It is the earliest example of a show that adults got rabidly into and created a fandom out of. It is the first otaku anime, and that is something that makes it very special, and it's still very much an important franchise. It's still one that's still getting made. It still has incredible amount of sales based on anything it does, and a lot of what it's done, even to be a cash-in, even stuff like Gundam Build Fighters, which is very obviously made to sell Gundam toys, is still a good show. So it's always worth looking out for new Gundam stuff. And I realize I titled this video like Robot History, but I really just wanted it to be Gundam History. So, Jesus Christ. Oh, fuck. Anyway, now you know why Gundam's important. Get the fuck out my motherfucking